aware that the button is going to be pressed shortly if it's not already, and we will therefore then be live, inverted commas. There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody formally to our Council of Governors meeting for August. Really good to see so many of you here, despite the fact that it is holiday season. So we have had a few apologies, which is, I think, understandable. So particularly governor apologies have been received from Pete Spink, Mike Bouden, Heba Kadir, Rupa Shah, and Claire Clinker. We also have a few executive apologies from Anne Rackham, our Chief Operating Officer, Paul Sheldon, our Director of Finance, and David Williams, Group Director of Strategy and Partnerships. Otherwise, oh, and I think Chris Oakes as well. And otherwise, we have a pretty good turnout, as I said, and we are quorate, so we're good to go. And particularly welcome to new governors. So Councillor Scott Edwards, who's one of our partner governors, so I think is joining us for the first time. I think also Monica, I think this might be your first meeting as well. Welcome. So good to have you here as well. And I'm trying to look across the screen to see if I can see anyone else for whom it's the first meeting. I don't think so, but I know most of the other governors on screen I have actually met, if not at an induction, well, if not at a council meeting, certainly at the induction. So really pleased to have you all here. So just to mention that we have, it's important that colleagues identify any declarations of interest in relation to items on the agenda. I know everyone will have been asked to submit their declarations, and we have a register available for public view, but it is important that we keep that up to date. So I'll just pause in case there is any declarations for items on our agenda today. Okay, I'll take that as none. So item 3 on our agenda is minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 13th of June. And I really just need to check with colleagues if they're happy that it's an accurate reflection of the meeting that we had, and if therefore they're happy to approve it. So if everyone's content, we'll sign those off. Any points of accuracy? No? Okay, lovely. So we'll take those as approved. And then action log and matters arising. So we have one outstanding action, and that was a point of discussion from our last meeting, and that was in relation to having a sort of discussion with our governor colleagues at KGH regarding our sort of collective approach to system collaboration, because this is something in the new code of governance. Richard, do you want to comment on that further?
Thanks, Krishni. Yes, we've got our next joint workshop with KGH coming up on, I think it's the 21st of August. And so we've got this penciled in, subject to agreement of KGH, of course, for that meeting.
Lovely. So I think it'd be a really good opportunity for us, particularly as we've probably both councils have got a number of new governors, I imagine, to just reflect together on the governor's role in supporting collaboration and system working as reflected in the new code of governance that we're required to work to. So good opportunity, and they usually do tend to be very good engagement opportunities as well to work with other governors in our local system. So thank you very much, Richard. We note that action remains outstanding, but we are in progress of addressing that with KGH. So we move on really to the first substantive item on our agenda, which is the Council of Governors Highlight Report. And I will hand over to Richard for this, please.
Thanks, Krishna. Good morning, everybody. I'll refer to paper D in the pack and draw out five areas in the report. I would encourage you, if you haven't already had the opportunity to do so, to read through the whole report, as there's quite a wealth of information in there. It's been a busy couple of months. So the first area I wanted to highlight, joining Krishna in welcoming both Monica and Scott to the council, and also just to report that Atakan Özkan has now left the council, and that we're then having a discussion with the council over the coming months about the approach to our governor elections programme over the coming months. The second area I wanted to highlight was the outcomes of the recent elections process that we had on the council to elect a lead and a deputy lead governor. Congratulations to Richard Amponsah for being elected as the lead governor, and also to Adam Webb, who's been elected as the deputy lead governor. We look forward to continuing to work with you in that capacity over the coming months. So the third area I wanted to highlight is the outcome of the recent constituency meetings that we've held in North and West Northamptonshire. So colleagues will probably be aware that these are meetings that we hold locally in the West and the North region of the county to bring both governors and non-exec directors together to talk about local issues. This time we took the opportunity to shine a light on two of the key areas that council has been working on. That is, to say, engagement and representation of children and young people, and also from those with diverse backgrounds. We had a really interactive discussion at both meetings, where we were joined by representatives from our children's services and also from our equality, diversity and inclusion team. So if you haven't already had the opportunity to join one of these meetings, I would encourage you to come along. These are really interactive sessions. So yeah, we're looking forward to the next ones of those coming up, actually. The fourth area I wanted to draw out then was our Pledges programme, which I'm pleased to say received national recognition from the NHS providers, which is the member body for trusts and foundation trusts in England. So Tracy and Richard went along to the national event, the showcase event, where they were able to share some of our local work on governor pledges with other colleagues from right across the country. You'll see in the report both a link to the animation, which is worth a watch if you haven't already seen it, and also some of the initial feedback that we received about our work at the event. And I also wanted to add that we've been approached after the event, actually, from the trust looking to take forward our idea, the pledge programme, in their local organisation, which is really pleasing to see. And the fifth area I wanted to highlight then was the relaunch of the Ideas, Issues and Questions log, otherwise known as the IQ log. We borrowed this idea and adapted it for our purposes from Lincolnshire. So we've launched this again recently. This is a simple mechanism that we use to facilitate answers to questions or responses to issues, or indeed progression of ideas that governors may have about our work as an organisation. We routinely share the outcome of the idea, question or issue raised with all governors, and that will form part of the weekly roundup communications that governors will be receiving in their inboxes on a regular basis. So if you have any ideas, issues or questions you wish to raise, do drop us a line at the Foundation Trust email accounts, and we'll add your items to the log and get a response to that shortly. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight and encourage people really to join us on Monday, the 23rd of September from 5:30 for our annual showcase events. This is an important annual opportunity to reflect on our annual report and accounts, to hear from our external auditors, and also to celebrate some of the work that we've done over the last year. Our theme this year is making a difference across the generation. So we're looking to profile services from children and young people right through to services for older people. If you are interested in coming along and haven't already done so, do visit our website for more information about the event and to book your place. So with that, Krishna, I'll hand back to you for any questions or comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. As Richard has highlighted, it's very much an update today. We're not asking for your approval for anything particular, but it's important to note the points that Richard has highlighted. Very happy to take any questions. So if you've got any comments or questions, please come in. So Joanne, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Krishna. Yes, thank you. Just to reinforce the constituency level meetings, I was at the North meeting where 8 governors joined us for a really, really interesting conversation, and I can't recommend it enough to governors. That, you know, if you're not able to make the one maybe that's geographically suitable for you, join the other one, because the content cuts across all of our communities, and I really, really can't recommend it highly enough. Really stimulating, very interesting, but a very informal session, so lots of opportunities for comments and questions and discussions. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you very much, Joe. And particularly for new governors, just to reinforce what Joe said, that this is really, you know, because obviously the Council of Governors meeting that you're attending today is very much the formal business meeting that we undertake, and there will be times when we need to make decisions in this meeting and approve things that some of the committees have worked on. But actually, the constituency meetings are real sort of more informal opportunities, but really good ways of sort of getting under the skin of some of the priorities that governors have identified. And as Joanne has said, a great opportunity to talk about these things in a more informal setting, and also build relationships with your NED colleagues, which I think is a really good opportunity. So thank you, Joe, for highlighting that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, just one other point I think I will probably reinforce is the IQ log, really conscious that it's not always easy for governors to think, you know, some people will naturally think of questions whilst we're in this meeting, but if you think of something after the meeting that you'd like to follow up, the IQ log there is an opportunity for us to facilitate that and look to address those. Some things might take a little bit longer to get an answer to than others, but we will endeavour to do that and manage that with you. So it's there to support you as part of a suite of things, really, that hopefully will help. Thank you very much, Richard. So we move on then to item 6, which is the update from our Membership Engagement and Representation Committee, which is a committee of the Council of Governors. And Tracy, as lead for members and governors, will update us from that.
Yes, thanks, Krishni. I'll also bring Brandon in after I've been through from his perspective as well as the chair of the meeting. So it's a nice follow-on really from the constituency meetings, because essentially we took what we learned from those constituency meetings to have a bit of more of an in-depth discussion about how we may want to improve our representation in our membership. So on the day we asked governors to reflect on everything they'd heard from the 2 constituency meetings, and also some of the socioeconomic data that we presented back to them. And we discovered there was 3 areas that we were largely underrepresented in, which was men, children and young people, and working age people. And we had our first session, which we simply asked governors, where do you think you should go, or we should go, to try and target and recruit some new members in these areas? And you'll see there we had these were kind of the grouped areas that came up, but clearly schools came up as a big area, the colleges and university, local businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, and also an area I think that we'd largely forgot until it was raised was our other local NHS providers, because they all have staff who could become public members. So that was a big area that was suggested. And also it became obvious through the discussion that governors had their own networks and their own meetings they attend, that they could go out and recruit members. So that was sort of the first part of the discussion. The second part of the discussion really was then to agree on some actions of how we would achieve doing this. So we broke this up into children and young people, and then the working age adults and the men. So as the schools are clearly and the colleges are going back in September, we thought that was probably the first area we should target. One idea that came up with was to pilot meeting or getting together with one school from North Northants and one school from West Northants, and maybe to attend and speak to students in smaller groups, essentially, because it was agreed that it might be easier to have smaller group conversations with students initially. Clearly, a lot of the schools and universities have freshers fairs or careers fairs, so that's another area that we thought we should target. And also governors who have got existing networks should use those as well. And as a follow-on from that meeting, I've actually met with a lady called Claire, who she works for the Bedford College Group, who some of you all know is the Tresham College Groups, and they have a career development programme with schools. and they're very keen to work with us to achieve some of these areas. So she's given me lots of ideas which I can feed back to governors as well. And then the second area where we came up with some actions was on the working age adults and men. So we decided to do this from November because it links more in with Men's Mental Health Awareness Month or Men's Health Awareness Month. So approaching the Chamber of Commerce or business networks, to use existing networks again. And again, there was this link to using the other NHS local organisations. And then one key area as well, which is linked to our action plan, was to link with faith groups. So that was another area essentially. So that was the main discussion, I would say, of our session, was discussing how we would do this and some actions. And then the second part of the session was to focus. David Williams joined us again, our Director of Strategy and Partnerships, to talk about the Trust Strategy Refresh. And you really asked for a call for action from governors to help promote the survey, which some governors will remember at our joint meeting with the board in July. There was a survey that you were asked to complete and facilitate. So the link to the survey is in the presentation, but we also request governors complete it themselves and also promote amongst their own sort of networks and members of the public. So they were the main areas essentially that were discussed at the meeting. But I didn't know, Ranjit, if you wanted to come in and just sort of say how you felt the meeting went from your governor's point of view.
Excuse me. First, well, I'd like to thank Tracy for putting all the information together and all the slides that she puts through to the meetings. And in terms of the meeting we had, it was very good, very interactive. The governors came up with a lot of good ideas and fed back some positive aspects and how we can move forward. So it wasn't just problems, but also providing solutions. So I think it was a good input and good chat from everybody involved, and a good discussion.
Thanks, Ranjit. And I think really that it's almost a call to action to governors to support these actions that we've come up with. And we will use the Pledges programme to sort of approach governors who've expressed an interest in some of these areas to help progress some of these actions. So if, for example, you said you wanted to attend a children's and young people event, we might approach you to attend maybe a careers fair or a school. So just look out for those, because we should start to see those opportunities coming forward, which you should be able to attend to help us meet these actions and ultimately our action plan across the priorities across 24, 25 and beyond.
Great, thank you, Tracy. And just wanted to welcome Roshni back to our meeting. Roshni's from the University of Northampton, and I think you're covering for Claire today, aren't you, Roshni? So thank you for stepping in. Roshni is just has mentioned in the chat, Tracy, that that she'd certainly happy to support a conversation about a promotion at the university, and bearing in mind, and we wish everyone in our community well with their results. I think it's GCSE results day today, and wish all the children and young people who are waiting for their results a good day. And clearly what the opportunity, the connection here is the opportunity to really signal what a fantastic career people could have through the NHS as well. And I know that Navina Evans, the Chief People Officer of the NHS, has been sort of highlighting those opportunities today to people who might be waiting for their results or have indeed received their results. So I think connecting young people to what we do is a real way of sort of introducing people, I think, to the NHS. So these things can be very beneficial. So thank you for taking that work forward. Any other questions or comments that anyone would like to make? Okay, so Tracy, I think you just wanted us to receive that report and note the update and really encourage governors to get involved with taking forward these actions as part of their pledges. So really interesting. And thank you, Ranjit, for chairing the meeting and supporting all that activity as well. So super, thank you. We move on then to item 7, which is the update to the terms of reference for our Nominations and Remuneration Committee, and delighted to ask Carol Phillips, our chair of that committee, to propose some amendments. Carol?
I'm hoping my camera's going to stay on, but apologies if it doesn't. So I've been having a little bit of an issue. Right, so this is a change in the Nominations and Remuneration Committee terms of reference for new governors and new members of the Council of Governors. I'm Carol Phillips and I chair the Nomination and Remuneration Committee on behalf of the Board of Governors. So the reason for this is we look at the terms of reference of various committees. I think it's every 2 years, Richard, is that right? Okay, so I've lost my, sorry, got it. Yeah. So the proposal is to take a pragmatic, I think, approach to the terms of reference, and the specific requirements is to have a patient and carer governor as a member, and the specific requirement for the lead governor to be a non-voting member. And these are the two changes that we'd like to bring to the Council of Governors. So we're simplifying that to read, as you see, to read the membership of the committee should comprise 6 governors and the trust chair. So instead of specific requirements, it would actually be open to all governors with no restrictions. So we're hoping that that will encourage people to put up their hand or pledge, as it were, to be involved in this committee. And it would mean that we don't have any non-voting members, because that's a bit messy, apart from anything else. Richard, that's not a governance point, is it? Oh, I've gone off. Yes, I have. So the decision required from the Council of Governors is to approve the change of terms of reference to remove those 2 specific requirements and add a general requirement for 6 governors plus the trust chair. Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to wait for the opportunity for questions. Do you want to finish?
Oh, yeah. No. It's fine. You go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Carol. I just really wanted to clarify in terms of the proposed amendment. Can I just clarify, please? So, is it correct that the proposal is that any of the governors is it correct any of the governors can propose to join the meeting? Is that correct?
No. I think you mean as an observation, as an observer.
Yeah, sorry, it's probably me. I probably need another cup of coffee.
Me too.
No, I think in terms of the 6 members, those 6 governors, sorry, would be continuous, so that we would have continuity at the meeting, rather than people coming in and out. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, sorry, I was nodding my head, but you couldn't see me. Yes, Richard, you had your hand up, but I think the answer is it's 6 governors. They have terms in terms of their terms as governors. When they resign as a governor or from the committee, then there's opportunities for another governor to join. I think that's how we go. Yeah, is that right, Richard?
It is, Carol, yes.
Yeah, okay. I think we have got 6 governors at the moment, have we not? Everybody's Yeah. Okay, good. Any other questions? Thanks, Michael. Any other questions? Okay. So I think we take that the decision is made to just change this, remove the specific requirements and add the general requirement for 6 governors and the trust chair. Okay, thank you, Krushni.
Thank you very much, Carol. And just again for new governors, this committee, you'll be hearing quite a lot from this committee going forward, because this committee undertakes the lead on behalf of the Council of Governors to oversee the recruitment process for non-executive directors. And that process is just about to start. So you'll hear a lot from the council, the Nominations Remuneration Committee. And indeed, there are opportunities, I think, to take part in that recruitment process. You don't have to be a member of the Nominations Remuneration Committee to support the recruitment process for non-executive directors. So I think it's a really helpful, it's an important role. It's what I regard it as one of the really important roles that governors take, is to lead that process. And of course, support me in terms of the performance appraisal process, as well as others, as you will hear later in the private meeting. So it's a really important committee. Pete Spinks, who I think is apology today, he recently has joined the committee, so there was a vacancy, but as Carol has explained very helpfully, we've just broadened it so that anyone can become a member in the future when a vacancy arises. So thank you for approving that. And actually, so we're going to move on then to our next session, which is updates from myself and Angela, and then indeed the Neds. And also we've got Sheila Begley giving us a presentation shortly as well. But first and foremost in this section, a little bit of an update from me, and then from Angela Hillary, our Chief Executive. Just from me, in terms of my comment about you're going to be hearing more about the recruitment process, I thought I'd just make sure that everybody is aware of why that is. So Saqib Ali, who I personally can't see Saqib on screen, but I know, oh, there he is, yes. Always difficult to pick people out in a screen full of people, but Saqib has secured an opportunity to become a NED at an acute trust, and part of his career development. I think it's a great move for him. So when his term comes to an end in December, he's going to be moving on to concentrate on that rather than try and juggle a lot of different roles. So we wish Saqib all the best, although he's going to be with us for a few months longer, so you'll see him supporting the council through the next few months, and indeed the board. But because of Saqib stepping down at the end of his term in December, we are literally about to launch a recruitment process. So hence it's just important to be aware that those are the reasons why we'll be having lots of conversations about that process and asking for your involvement in various things. The other thing just to mention is that governors early in the year were involved in what we call a well-led review. So we've been through a process of having an external review. It's part of sort of an external an opportunity to get some external feedback around our leadership and governance. And some governors were involved in the opportunity to provide some feedback. We'll be putting a bit more about that in the public domain in our September meeting, I think, Richard. But I just wanted to mention that because that's an important opportunity for us as a board and for all of us, I think, in the organisation to reflect on our approach to leadership and governance and anything that we can improve on. So to share with you that we've had that review, we're taking forward the actions and we're going to be saying more about that in public at our board in September. And the other thing, just to briefly mention, is that governors will have heard we have to go through a process of making sure that members of the board are fit and proper to undertake the role of being a board member, that governors were involved in that, in looking at the evidence through the Nomination Remuneration Committee, that the board members are fit and proper people. And I just really wanted to share with you that we'd made a submission to the NHS England Midlands region regarding our evidence around that, and they've signed it off to confirm they're satisfied. So I thought it would be helpful for you to be aware of that. That's, I think, all from me. They're in the papers, the brief papers that we sent you. There is a link to my chair's report that went to the last board, and indeed Angela's report that went to the last board. So you can always access those, but I will introduce Angela now to give us a sort of more current update on what's at the top of her agenda. So welcome, Angela, and over to you.
Thanks, Krishni, and good morning, everybody. Good to be here with you. So yes, a variety of topics that I think useful just to share with the governors. And first and foremost, I think important to say straight away, the civil unrest and the racial violence that we saw across the country is very much at the forefront of our minds here at NHFT. And we have, as you would expect us to, undertaken quite a lot of communication, listening events, connectivity across the organisation during this period, as well as ongoing, because we have a Together Against Racism work programme, which we do in partnership with LPT, our group partner. But clearly this was shocking and clearly affected many staff, if not all staff, to a degree. And it was really important that people mobilised quickly. So thank you to Dave Mayer and the executive team who responded very quickly, and to also say to all of our staff how brilliant they were in responding, continuing to support patient care and reaching and supporting each other during this time. So I think it's really important, Krishna, we know this has not gone away. This is not something that, because the escalation is less, that we will be less focused on. But I think it's really important to say this is a really important focus for us. And we've continued to have our Together Against Racism sessions where we're looking at how more we can do across the group, and Chris Oakes leads that work for us. So that's a really important one. We continue to work with partners around children and young people services and recent SEND inspections, which you've mentioned before, for both West and North Northants councils and the ICB are really important, because obviously we work a lot in those services. So that remains a really important focus. We want to make sure that we are co-producing and helping to support the service improvements that are needed. So that is very much at the forefront of our minds. Important, I think last time that I mentioned finance, that still remains a significant focus area. We have our value programme. That is important because it gives us the opportunity to not just look at the financial efficiencies, but also to understand the quality and safety impacts and the transformation that's required as part of that. What's important, I think, for the governors to be aware of is that, you know, the finance, although we are still, you know, delivering against plan, it remains challenging, and we also have to operate within a system context. So that is something that myself and Paul and others, the members of the executive team, are very much focused on, because we can't do this in isolation. So that involves a lot of connectivity, and I think challenges for Northamptonshire system overall. And then I think the other thing that I would mention is winter planning. So a lot of work underway, and Rackham and the operational teams are really working very much hand in hand with system partners on this. And of course, the challenge is always on to support everybody in making sure that patient care is in the right place at the right time. We've got a lot of work going on. We had an urgent emergency care summit that many of us attended, and as chief execs, again, we met again last night to understand the activity data and to understand what the plans are. So a lot of focus on that, and a lot of staff focus likewise. And the final comment would be to say, as ever, a big thank you to our staff, because again, whilst I just highlight a few topics, there's a lot of work going on to manage the challenges, the demands and the opportunities, and we're ever grateful for our staff for doing that. Thank you, Krishni.
Thank you, Angela. So is there anything that governors would like to take the opportunity to just ask more broadly about anything that Angela said or anything I've said that you'd like to just follow up? So everyone content to note where we are? And certainly I would like to reinforce what Angela said about, you know, that it's a difficult period, particularly as events unfolded in the last couple of weeks. But and it was, you know, it was quite hard talking to people about how they felt and hearing about that. And so, but it was really important that people felt supported, and we did our best to make sure we made adjustments to support staff in that situation. But as Angela said, the work doesn't stop, because I think it has kind of raised people's again, I think, you know, kind of made sure that we already resolved to really work hard on being an anti-racist organisation. But I think that just sort of reinforced how important that work is, and allowed us to refresh that as well. So so thank you. If there are no further questions, then I'm delighted to invite Sheila Begley, Dr. Sheila Begley, who's one of our members of staff, and as has become sort of customary, we like to invite our governors to share some of their experiences and insights from their role. So we've asked Sheila to do that. So I'll hand over to you, Sheila.
Oh, hello. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you a bit today about my role in the clinical investigations team at the Trust. So if we just move on to, oh, thank you. Just to give you a bit of background about the team, it works within the patient safety department, and it is working in accordance with the patient safety incident response framework, which I think those that were at the previous meeting, Richard had talked about. But I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. That actually this year has replaced the the serious incident framework, and it focuses on patient safety investigations and how we do them, and to make sure that we're looking at it in a way that we can generate the greatest learning for the organisation, and it uses a range of different approaches to generate learning, and to make sure that it is proportionate to the incident. So Julia talked about the work that they were doing in pressure ulcer. It allows, so when you get a group of pressure ulcers reported as incidents, you can look at that in a thematic way. So you can look at a whole group of pressure ulcer incidents and pull out specific themes that are similar to all pressure ulcers, and then actually take action to try and prevent them happening again. Whereas in the past, all of these would have resulted in a clinical incident investigation, which is takes quite a long time. And it does mean now that with the PSIRF, that clinical incident investigations can be focused on the most serious cases, specifically around things like death in service, so that you can get an in-depth look at that. The purpose of clinical investigations, really, the first thing is to make sure that you involve the patient, the family, and the next of kin in identifying and learning from it. So the main thing also is to establish the facts around the incident and to gather evidence associated with the incident. So looking at the chronology of events. And that's not always clear from the incident until you actually go into a little bit more detail about the chronology and what actually happened. And it also provides the opportunity to have a retrospective review. So, you know, once you know what's happened, it's much easier to determine what might have been the cause. So it helps you identify the underlying cause or the contributing factors, and there's not always one of those. There can be many contributing factors, and identify actions that are required to prevent further recurrence and make improvements. And this is obviously most important in managing future risk. It also provides an opportunity to share learning from the investigation and share improvement actions, again, to ensure patient safety and prevent the same thing from reoccurring. And we also provide information to an inquest where there is one. And the key thing about the incident investigation is that it's open and honest, and provides detailed information to determine the cause of death at an inquest. So it's quite a complicated process and can take quite a long time. I won't go through each one of these individually because, as you can see, there's quite a long list. But it starts by being allocated a case and getting all of the information in. And then one of the first things I do is to contact the family or the patient, because it's very difficult to proceed with an investigation until you know what questions the family have got, what concerns they have around the incident, and how the investigation can help the family understand what's happened to them or their relative. So that is a really, really important part. And for me, I often find that's a very emotive part, because you do, through that, build up a connection with the family. And throughout the investigation, you maintain contact with the family until the final report comes out. So once I've met with the family, then I can start going back and familiarising myself with the detail of the case, going through all of the notes and information that I've got, and compile a chronology. And that's often up to 3 months prior to the incident. I often speak to staff, speak to other agencies, sometimes outside of our organisation, ask for information. Some cases can be fairly straightforward. Some can be very complicated. I had a previous one that involved contacting the person's work, and GPs and all of the people that had provided support over the period. One of the key things is to try and understand what were the factors that contributed to the incident occurring, and identify a root cause. And sometimes there isn't a root cause, not a single thing that might be attributed to causing the incident, but there might be many contributory factors. And from there, you pull out some recommendations. Any recommendations I can't sit in a room and come up with those recommendations myself, and you do have to work that. You go back to the family, talk to them about what you found, what recommendations you think might help to prevent things in the future. Make sure that they're involved in it, and also members of staff and the managers of the services. So I often talk to them about what I found and what recommendations we could put in place to support improvement. And then following that, there's a process of sign-off. The report is checked a number of times for accuracy, and one of the key things is that any sort of recommendations are fair and proportionate, and also can actually be achieved. There's no point in putting in recommendations that it's impossible to deliver. It goes through a process of being checked by the service directors, our directors of nursing, our medical director, before it's finally signed off. And once the report is signed off, then the family will get a copy of that report, and I will meet with them after they've had time to read it and sit down and talk to them about it. That I find is it can be challenging to do, but it's also very good to do. And the family, I always find the families are very grateful for getting all of the information in one place and getting it presented to them in a way that they can understand, how things have happened. Very often there are things in the report that families they weren't aware of. Sometimes their relative haven't wanted them to know certain things. So often, while they feel that they have been involved in that person's medical life, sometimes there are things that they were completely unaware of, and so it is quite nice for them to have some of that explanation, and I think they often find it quite reassuring. If there is going to be an inquest, as I said previously, then the report will go to the coroner, and then the report obviously goes to the commissioners. The key principles around patient safety investigations is about getting learning about something that went wrong. And then the key thing is to make changes in practice and policy to reduce the risk of it actually happening again. I think I often find the difficult thing sometimes is about getting through to staff that it isn't about blaming them or criticising them, but it's actually about getting as much information out of them to make sure that we get proper and valuable learning, to make sure that we can protect patients and staff going forward. I think often the type of incidents we get to investigate, they have had a catastrophic impact on the patient or the family, and it's really important to give them an opportunity to be involved, to be listened to, and have any questions that they might have answered. And throughout the process and after, patients and families do need ongoing support. It can be quite traumatic receiving a report and then having, talking it through. And so they do need specific support to help them do that and get as much as possible out of the process. So I was asked also just to say why did I get involved in this area. So it's quite difficult to go through, really, isn't it? I've had a long history in the health service. So I started nursing in 1974. So I was thinking last night, goodness, that's like 50 years, half a century. It's like such a long time, isn't it? And I mean, it's nursing for me has been just the most wonderful career. I would quite happily recommend it to anybody. It provides such a great value. So, like for me, I've worked all over. I'm sure lots of us have, but I've worked in A&E, in theatres. I worked in Harley Street. I worked as a practice nurse. I worked in a foundry in Road in Belfast as their industrial nurse. So that was really interesting. And I also worked for Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilders, as their industrial nurse, usually fishing bits of metal out of people's eyes. That was the most common injury. So I mean, apart from my nursing, I also had the honour actually of working as a service director for a community trust and a director of nursing for a short period of time, and then clinical. I finished my career as clinical director, and the honour of chairing the Domestic and Sexual Violence Committee, which was a group of the Community Safety Partnership. When I retired, I think I probably felt a bit of a void, and I saw this job advertised for clinical investigators, and I thought, well, that's just the job for me. So it's a bank role. It's very flexible. I have the team that I work with are absolutely amazing. They're great, very caring people. For me, I love writing, so writing these reports is great for me. I get to meet patients and families. I can often provide information to them that will help them come to terms with something awful that's probably happened to them. I work with really nice clinical staff, and it's really great to get to know them. And for me, it's just nice to be able to still make a contribution. So that's the end.
Thank you so much, Sheila. That's probably given people a huge insight into, I'm sure, into the kind of role that you undertake. Perhaps, if you don't mind, I'll just add a question. What prompted you, Sheila, then to become a governor as well as putting yourself forward for the investigations role? It'd be just interesting to hear where that sort of what your prompt was for that.
Well, I think probably part of I felt that I'd got something to offer, with my experience, and also it provides a sort of different perspective on the organisation. So it's quite nice to see it from a clinical point of view, but then also from the way that the organisation's governed.
Brilliant. Sheila, thank you so much. I think, there's some, kind of comments in the chat about what a fantastic career, and it's brilliant, for us that, and for the NHS, that you've taken the opportunity to come back and contribute to your amazing skills to our organisation, to the NHS more broadly. So, and it's such an important area of work because, unfortunately, things do happen, and therefore, we have to obviously respond to that and make sure that we take those forward in an appropriate way. So I think hopefully it's given people a real insight into what's involved in that. There are a couple of, maybe if you're happy, Sheila, to take any comments or questions. There's probably a couple of people who want to come in, and I'll pick up anything in the chat as well at the same time. So Julia first, please.
Thanks, Krishni. Thank you, Sheila. 2 quick points. One is what a fantastic example of, staying within the NHS family and bringing all that experience, excuse me, to such an important area. Well done, and really, your whole team, I know, provide such a valuable service. The reason I come in particularly is that through the patient safety group and then through quality and safety committee and then actually to board, we see the outputs of some of the, the results of some of the investigations, and every one that we see in any of those scenarios, both Robin and I always say, very open, honest investigations. It takes a lot of time to work with people and get underneath what actually happened, and treat people with sensitivity and respect and through the whole process. And I totally commend you for that, because as I say, the results are really important. The learning that comes out is really important, and we see some of the things that are changed, whether that's processes or clinical practice, etc. The direct impact to patients is huge. So for the other governors on the call, our assurance processes, we do use your reports, your learning to then inform future practice and changes. But the way you handle them sensitively to get to the root cause is incredible, and that is noted. At every stage, you may not hear that directly back, but at every stage they are absolutely commended for pulling out the things that didn't go well as the things that did. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Richard, please. Richard Amponza.
Thank you. Thanks, Krishna. Thank you, Sheila, for that update. Having been involved in the setting up of this team, I know what great work you guys do. So well done to you and the team. So there's a comment that Michael put in the chat about involvement, and I know Linda commented on that, but I just wanted to add that one of the key principles of this new way of investigating is it places patients, their carers, families at the center of everything we do. So it talks about compassionate engagement and involvement of those that are affected by patient safety incidents. And it's not just them, it includes staff as well. And so we, as NHFT, have introduced what we call a 2-tier system of duty of candor. So obviously, when an incident happens, we reach out, the clinical team will initially reach out to the family to say, we've heard this has happened, and we just want to acknowledge that and extend our condolences or whatever, and then we'll go back. And if there's any further reviews, we'll let you know. So once it is decided that it's going to be discussed at the weekly forum, we then go back to them and say, it's going to be discussed on such and such a date. Do you have any further input, insights that you want us to include in that discussion? So following that, the patient safety team will then write to the family to say, it was discussed at the forum. It's called the Review of Significant Events for Learning, the Rose Learning Forum. So it goes there, and then we write back to them to say, this is what happened. It was discussed on such and such a day. This was the learning that we took from it. These are the further steps we're going to take. So we keep them informed at every stage. So that's something to say about, the duty of candor, the openness, the transparency that we try to inject into this process. And for me, one of the important benefits of this new way of investigating is it gives provider organizations such as us the opportunity to really determine what is an appropriate and proportionate response to a patient safety incident. Because previously, the then clinical commissioning group would tell us this has happened, so you were instructed basically to do a report. It might not necessarily tell us what is happening. It might not necessarily give us any new learning, but it was just based on the outcome. Now, what this enables us to do, the new way of working enables us to do, is we determine what is an appropriate response. So it may be that a similar incident has happened. We've implemented recommendations and actions that are actually delivering, and we can see is delivering positive change, in which case it might not be the best use of our resource to then conduct another investigation. So we are more in the driving seat in terms of what would give us the greatest learning and help us to use our resources most effectively. So it's a great new way of working. We're still, Linda did say that we are, quite ahead, and that is true, but there's still a lot of learning, that we need to do to involve people and just take it to the grassroots in terms of our clinicians and just involve them from the very beginning so that we reduce the amount of time spent investigating, but then we direct our focus and our efforts more on picking out what learning we can evidence to improve patient safety. So well done to you, Sheila, and the team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Michael, please.
Thank you, Krishni. Richard, I think at the risk of being a little bit challenging here, I am a little bit concerned, and I'm sure you didn't mean it, when you say that the organisation determines what is an appropriate response. And whilst I understand, I think the context clearly of what you're saying about use of resources, I just wondered how, again, we might not have the time, but I just wondered because to me that suggests that the organisation is still in control of the investigation. And in my experience, and I think particularly within mental health, there are so many complexities. So my slight alarm is in the wording, the choice of words about the organisation being in control and determining the appropriate response, because I'm not quite sure all members of the public would necessarily sympathise and understand that comment.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sure Linda will have a comment on that, but yeah, it might not be the best choice of words in terms of control. Everything we do is really collaborative. So as I indicated, when an incident happens, our first port of call is to contact the family. Actually, sometimes it might be the family that alerts us to an incident having happened, because obviously they left with a loved one and they'll let us know, so and so is under your care, has had this incident. And so we'll reach out and then, engage them in the process. We invite impact statements from them. We do several visits. We have a patient family liaison lead who I think Linda mentioned in a comment. So they would go to people's homes and just sit down with them and just unpick the case and tell us how it felt like for them as people looking on and supporting the person. So yeah, it might not be the best use in terms of control, but we work very collaboratively with them. And there's still a lot of work to do, as I said, for example, bringing on board the coroners, just to understand that, we might be changing the way we do things, but it does not mean that the quality and the in-depth investigation analysis of incidents is lacking. So yeah, we do work very closely, and we try always to involve them. Just to give you an example, last year we published what we call the Patient Safety Incident Response Plan, which guides our responses to incidents within the organization. It was very much a collaborative affair. We involved lots of patient groups. We involved, from the very beginning, the working group involved patients, involved people who are actively receiving services, involved past patients. So we drew up this plan. It's been signed off. They inputted into it. They'll be involved in reviewing it in terms of what does it tell us, what should be the focus for investigations. So it's not something that we do it's something that we do very much as a co-production effort.
Thank you, Richard. Linda, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Krishni, and thank you, Michael, for raising that question and the valid points. I just wanted to provide some assurance that the previous process that we used, which was our investigation process, was one that became a tick box. Tick box in the sense that we had a timescale to complete an investigation, and you'll appreciate that some of these incidents are still quite raw for the family, so they're not able to engage immediately, but we had a clock to work to, which then meant we don't get the voice of that patient. So when we talk about the level of investigation that we would then be completing, it's more so the level of engagement that we want to achieve, as well as the learning that comes out of that. So we do have our patient safety partners who come in and support the voice of that patient. They are also key and fundamental in where the family are not able to engage with us. They can be involved for us to immediately get the learning, which is key, because we don't want something else to then happen. So if we can prevent, then we can immediately do that. Unfortunately, there'll be incidents that are similar to previous incidents where there is no learning to come out of that incident. And those are the ones that we will use a different approach, which is what Richard was trying to say, where we still engage the patient, the family, but actually it's not going to be just an investigation for the purposes of doing an investigation. So we will still have that engagement. We will still follow through that information. And aside from patient safety incidents, there may be other investigations already linked to the same case. So sometimes there could be an ongoing criminal investigation. There could be a safeguarding investigation. there could be a structured judgment review. So there'll be various other investigations that might occur, which then means we don't need to do this full investigation ourselves, but we work with other partners on an investigation that's still taking place. So the main ethos for us is to ensure that we've involved the key people when we are looking at these incidents. And that could be staff, that could be relatives, carers, people who know the individual. Because when we've moved to PSERV, what's really been helpful is that we are now getting to know the individual, particularly where people have died. We only have a snapshot, but actually when we've used PSERV, engaged those closest to the individual, that person becomes alive. It's very different to what we had previously with our investigations, where actually we were just writing an incident that has occurred. But this is someone's life that we're talking about. So it started to frame in a really different way, including where we've had patients who've had pressure ulcers and they are telling us their experience. The learning is really rich, not just for themselves, their families, carers, but also for our staff. So we are working collaboratively and we ensure that throughout the voice of the patient is amplified. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I think it's the flexibility, isn't it, that this new approach has allowed. And I really just wanted to say, I think also that there's a very good transparent sort of recording of the decision making around what approach to take from the Rose Forum. That's always documented. So there's a lot of safeguards in place, and of course there's a patient safety committee that can review the process, which I think Julia mentioned earlier, review that the learning that's come out of cases and consider whether also if there was a concern whether the right processes have been used. But hopefully, Michael, that's answered your question. I know Monica said that she was going to ask a question, but it's answered it. Yes, of course, this is still a new approach for us, but and for everybody. But Linda's already said I think at the heart of it is about putting patients really at the centre of the process, and that's something we've always really tried to do, and learning as well, and no doubt we will continue to focus on this as we go. And in fact, just to reiterate, really, there is a patient safety report that goes to the board. I think, is it every other board? I think, Richard. I'm thinking off the top of my head. So if you wanted to look at that report, it will be in the board papers, and you will see then the breakdown of incidents, the learning that's been recorded, any sort of data that you want to see, some trends around patient safety incidents, etc. So I would draw your attention to that paper, which is available in the public domain. And pretty much every other month, every other board meeting, there will be a patient safety report in public, which Linda presents. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheila. That's prompted a really good discussion about patient safety, which is an absolutely huge priority for us. And is at the core of our strategic priorities in the way that we describe those as well. So thank you, Sheila, for bringing our attention to that important area through your experience and your insights and your story. But it's also allowed us to address some important broader areas, I think. So the final item we have on our agenda today is from our non-executive directors. It's our risk and assurance topic, which is being presented today by Judith Seymour, who's our chair of our performance committee, and Joanne, who you've also heard from before. Joanne is the deputy chair of that committee. And today we're talking about our estate strategy, which we thought would be it's not something we've talked a lot about, but it's actually a really important part of our focus as an organisation. So over to you, Judith.
Thanks, Krishni. I'm going to hand straight over to Jo to kick off this discussion.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Just go back to the original slide, Tracy. We'll start off with some general bit. So good morning, everybody. Jo Lancaster, I'm an Associate NED and I'm Deputy to UDIT on the Performance Committee. So just a brief context before we get into some of the detail. So these types of strategies, these are the big overarching strategies that support the delivery of the Trust's big visions and plans. And this sits alongside things like the digital strategy and the workforce strategy, which complement each other. So this isn't a freestanding document that to be seen as such. It complements the other things that already exist. And these documents take a long time to evolve. They're not built just overnight. And then what will follow from a strategy like this are detailed delivery plans, which will then see through the ambitions that are set out in the strategy. So when it comes down to what we're trying to achieve today, because these take time to build, what we're trying to demonstrate is how we have overview, how we seek assurance and at what stages, and just test that. Right, so I'm going to get into a bit more detail now, Tracy. So if you could take us to the next slide, thank you. So again, scene setting, when we talk about our estate, we're talking about all of the environments within which our services are delivered. We have over 5,000 members of staff working across the county, and they deliver 260 plus different services. And in terms of patient contact, there's over 1 million face-to-face patient contacts across a year in all of these settings. So whether it's local hospitals, clinics, partners' premises, or people's homes, we have to remember that the environment that the Trust employees work in aren't always our buildings. So we work in Northampton General Hospital, we work in Kettering General Hospital, as alongside our community buildings and our 10 main sites. We do have some properties that we own. So there are some freehold properties, but there's a lot leased that we don't actually own. And as I said, we do share partner buildings, but we do have quite an aging estate. So of those 10 main sites across the county, there's 37% of them were built, only 37% of them were built after 1994. The rest of them predate that by some years. So we do have an estate that needs to evolve, to change, to reflect modern standards of service delivery. So next slide, please, Tracy. So in terms of the context for the strategy, we don't have lots and lots of experts on this in-house, and so we brought some expertise in to help. And what we did as non-exec directors was oversee the early stages of some of the sessions. So there was 14 workshops were held, including staff and integrate with partners and things like that. There was a number of themes emerged, which Judith will get onto, so I won't go into too much detail on that one. But what we took as assurance was the output from some of those sessions, as well as the structure of how they were arranged, where they were arranged, who was engaged in those sessions. And the Trust really is aiming to provide an estate that is flexible in how it's used, so that ultimately the best services that we can possibly deliver can be delivered in a safe and secure environment at places which are convenient for service users. So I'm going to pause at that point and pass over to Judith to get into some of the detail that came out.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. So the strategy, as you already heard from Jo, was co-produced with staff and partners of NHFT as well. And it came out with a very long list of opportunities for improvement, but also aspirations, things like trauma-informed buildings and sustainability, which is a very important target for everybody, including the NHS. The key themes, and again, long list, I'm going to try to summarize and just keep to the most important ones, is to provide better access to services, to develop existing services and or provision of new services so that we as a trust can keep up with demand, to ease delivery of those services, both for the service users, but also for staff, to improve clinical quality of service, which needs to be supported also by our states, to improve the environmental quality of the service as to how people feel when they're with us, to improve the strategic fit of services, regeneration of the estate, which is quite a complex area, and of course to meet the training and teaching research needs of the trust, but also to meet national, regional and local policy directives. So there is a lot there in the key themes to consider, and therefore the plan that has come out is actually a very long and very detailed plan. And the way that it's been approached is that it was divided into short, medium and longer term plan, if you like, the options of what to do, and they remain, the longer term options remain options because they're dependent on delivery by others apart from NHFT, including permission from landlords, for example, because as Joe has already alluded to it, some of our estates are in fact leased, and in fact cooperation from other partners within the NHS family and within the ICS, within the integrated care system. The shorter options is very much focused around utilisation of our estates currently, so that's very, if you like, internally focused to the trust. We want to ensure that the estate is fit for purpose, and we want to ensure that we can plan appropriately for future service demands. And the medium-term options are very much working at, if you like, the back office staff, so corporate services staff and also staff who provide the really important administrative functions to allow services to operate, as to how their working environment could be improved, but also how agile or hybrid working can free up some space for clinical use, which is really, the front end of the NHS. So that is how the plan is divided. It is, as Joe and I've already said, really complex. It's over 80 pages. But more importantly, if I can have the next slide, please, Tracy. From your point of view as governors, and to some extent from our point of view as non-execs as well, it's how we gain assurance, how we gain understanding that things are moving in the right direction. That is, in fact, the most important thing, not the strategy itself almost. Joe's already alluded to it, but it does need re-emphasising that a number of items on the strategy is very much codependent on other strategic documents like the digital plan, the people plan, the green plan. So our strategies at NHFT all work hand in hand to deliver the overarching NHFT aims, which is a DIGBQ plan. The benefits realisation plan, which is how the performance committee is going to look at and assess and assure itself as to how the estates plan is being delivered, is very much looking at whether our estate is cost effective, whether it's providing sustainable, efficient and fit for purpose services, or allowing services to be efficient and fit for purpose, whether there is improved flexibility so that new service developments can happen, whether an estate meets the current and the future needs of the populations, because we do have data around that, whether we can demonstrate that there has been improvements in quality and patient experience, because we have already talked about quality of patient care, and that is really at the heart of what the estates plan is meant to be doing as well. Whether there is an enhancement of services in the community, because NHFT being community-based needs to be where there is the demand. So we need to reassess whether our current estate is where the demand is, where people need to access us. And also we will look at how we've aligned with regional and national objectives and regulatory objectives, because we work as part of a system. And we also will be looking at our carbon reduction, our improved environmental performance. So as ever, this assurance and this delivery is dependent on capital. There is currently a commitment to improve mental health provision nationally, so we are hoping that capital will be available, but clearly that's a question I can't answer longer term. We're also dependent to some extent on the digital and the health inequalities budget, which will feed in to some aspects of the delivery of this plan. And as I've already mentioned, we will also rely on our partners that we work with to ensure that this plan will be fully delivered at the end of the 5 years. The assurance that we aim to look at and gain is very much with wearing a lens, wearing the specs of positive outcomes. So this isn't about meeting targets. This is about positive outcomes for patient experience, for quality, for improved environmental performance, and ensuring that our estate better meets the current and future needs of our population here in Northamptonshire. So I'm going to stop there. I'm really happy, both Joe and I are really happy to answer any questions you may have. Estates is quite a sort of, well, it's a specialist area. I had to do a lot of learning around estates, but it's really, really interesting. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Judith. So I think there was one question which probably has already to some extent been answered, but you're welcome to say any more if you want to, but just a question from Ranjit about making it infrastructure more environmentally friendly. And I know Joe has sort of responded to that, but it is an important part, isn't it, Judith, of the focus on estates.
Yeah.
And there is a sort of target for us around net zero for the NHS. So do you want to say any more on that?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Ranjit. We do also have a green plan. So, and that dovetails in with the estates. So it's something that we can perhaps talk about at another governors session, or perhaps in a full council of governors. It's totally up to you. But we do have plans for it. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. And certainly, part of that will be things like energy usage and, environmentally friendly infrastructure, the classic stuff like, lights that automatically turn off and, that sort of thing, which newer buildings tend to have. Okay, there are definitely some comments or further questions. So, Melanie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I thought it might just be helpful to add, as Judith has alluded to, that there is a system-wide approach here as well across Northamptonshire, which, as NED, I attend the Integrated Planning and Resources Committee of the ICB. And just in the last meeting, we received the draft infrastructure strategy, which takes all of that estates and digital and sustainability and looks at it collaboratively across the whole. Interestingly, I think that the ICB recognises NHFT is more advanced in their estate strategy, and therefore, the strategy that we were able to bring to the work it is very well positioned and will support the wider system to build on that infrastructure strategy as it goes through its various consultations and iterations now. So by attending that committee, as a NED, I certainly gain an additional level of assurance, if you like, across the system work to make sure that it's both supporting NHFT and that NHFT is supporting further afield. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Right, we have Marcella, please.
Hello. Hi, Judith and Joe. I'm not too sure if this is perhaps the context in which to raise this issue, but just a matter with regards to the estates, as you're saying, that's to do with the different properties, hospitals, and so on. The issue of RAC has that at all been featured at all in your review of the strategy? And I know this will be ultimately a political decision, but I think the focus on the funding to sustain Kettering General Hospital, which I think is still part of NHFT, Kettering Hospital, does it come under NHFT or not? No, sorry.
No.
Okay, I just dropped that then because I wasn't too sure. I was trying to check if it was, but definitely, perhaps I think the issue of RAC and how is that perhaps featured across the different estates in the trust?
Yeah, good question, Marcella. Thank you, because that was a big feature, wasn't it, a few months ago? And certainly just to confirm, Kettering General doesn't come under our responsibility, but it does. It will be the infrastructure strategy that Melanie talked about, which is the system-wide approach would capture all of us. So Kettering General, Northampton General, and us, and other, I'm sure probably wider than that as well, Melanie, because I guess GP premises and that sort of thing will also be a feature of a wider infrastructure strategy. So there will be a bit sort of some oversight at system level. Joe, are you able to answer the RAC question as well? Because I know we've had conversations about that. Joe?
Yes, thanks, Krishni. So the issue of RAC was dealt with a few years ago when it first came to light, and all public bodies that held property had to do reviews of all of their estate. So it's not explicitly referred to in the strategy because it was dealt with earlier on. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And was there anything else? Because you put your hand up, I think, when no, it was in relation to that. That's fine. Thank you. Yes. So every organisation, NHS organisation, had to do a review. It wasn't a particular issue for us, but there are other NHS organisations it definitely did affect. But we've all got our own, obviously, our own response to that. So we were assured that it wasn't a challenge for us. Anu, please.
Hi, I'm a member of the Disability Network, and we were having a discussion the other day because there has been some issues in the estates where some staff and even some members of the public, when they need to go, we didn't have like a lift to go because we can't walk up or whatever. So are you looking into those, how to see whether it's the estates are suitable for disability people?
Yeah, thank you, Anu, and I will bring Joe in again just to say that I've had some conversations with Jane Evans, who chairs the Enable Network, doesn't she, about some couple of issues that I've certainly followed up with Chris Oakes and Paul Sheldon and others. So there are some specific things that we've tried to address. But Joe, do you want to make a broader point about that?
So it was just picking up on this point because I think the age of the estate. So that's why I alluded to at the beginning. Only 30% of our buildings were built since 1994. So we've got a lot of older buildings that need to be modified to be brought up to modern standards. And I think, the overarching ambition for the strategy is to provide an environment where it can be a person-centered care, positive and effective, safe working environment. And that will run right the way through. So of course, access will be part of that. So yeah, where it occurs, it'll be part of capital programs in the longer term, but the strategy definitely picks that up.
Thank you, Anu. So I think in the short term that there are some challenges. I think we have to acknowledge that, and we need to make sure that our managers are responsive to adjustment, making adjustments and finding ways of working through that. The difficulty that Joe's alluded to is the fact that there are some parts of the estate which are older and therefore work needs to be done. So do you want to come back, Anu?
Yes, just a quick question because I find it difficult to walk a length of distance, actually. So I was on call this last weekend and I had to go to RCI building. And is RCI building part of the estates that you cover as well?
No. Is that Haylock House?
Haylock House, yeah.
Yes. It's not our building, is it? That one? I don't think. No.
So we don't do anything. Okay.
It's the ICB building.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they had barricaded, so I couldn't actually take the car in for me to go to the building to do the work, but I had to park the car outside and then walk a long distance and go. So I was just wondering whether, sorry, so if it's not part of NHFT building, that's fine. Then we'll have to have a different discussion to see if like me representing a person as a disability person, how, if anyone in our teams who has that disability, how can we access the building if we have to go? So that's a question.
Yeah. So Anu, I think it's a really important question. Certainly, I think some of these things need to be picked up through line managers supporting you, or people, because we need to make sure that everyone can have the right access. I think that's really important, and people feel able to, do their job or access the building they need to. It's not a problem I've particularly had at Haylock House, so I'm not sure why, but it may be that something specific happened. But without going into...
This is during the weekend.
Okay.
I was on call during the weekend, so Saturday I had to go into the building, and it was like, the bollards were put in on all sides, so you couldn't get in.
Okay. So maybe that's something we need to pick up separately, but it's not, unfortunately, not our building, so we don't have control. I think you need an access card to get into the building and that sort of thing. So I know from my own personal experience, but we don't, it's not our building, so we're not in control of that. But if I think somebody, it is important that we have a vehicle for you to, you need to be able to raise that with your manager, and for us to be able to solve that through the right route, because it might be a specific issue for the specific circumstances, I think. But the broader point about access is an important one, and one absolutely we need to be focused on. Melanie, do you want to come in?
Yes, I was merely going to say that, Anu, it may be helpful to use the Enable network as well, who often can take up these causes where there are specific access issues at our own or other buildings that we may need to visit. So it might be worth just reaching out within Enable. Generally speaking, Enable and indeed Reach and all of the networks are involved in the estate strategy development and inputting with the estates team to address both future development and specific issues that might arise from time to time, either because of short-term maintenance work or because of long-term issues. So I think there are some good communication channels that I have seen as a NED to enable us to respond and to make sure that all the right information is reaching the strategy. So let's reach out to Jane Evans as chair of the Enable network as well to support you on this particular point.
Thank you, Melanie. Final word from Linda.
Yeah, Krishna, I was going to say I'll link in with Anu after the meeting, because obviously if you're on call, it's part of your duty. So I'll pick that up so that I can raise it with the colleague in ICB. So I'll connect with you after the meeting if that's needed.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Well, I hope people found that interesting. Well, I think it might be the first time we've talked about estates at a council of governors meeting, and we just thought, it is an important part of our strategy, and so it felt like an opportunity to really talk about the environment that we have both for the quality of care that we provide to our patients and our service users, but also, for reasons that Anu and others have raised in terms of the quality of the environment for all our staff, and recognizing that different people have different needs. So having the right estate is a really, really important priority for us. And we recognize lots of work to do. And some of that we will need to work with partners for all the reasons we've said, because we don't always have our own buildings. But I hope you got a good insight into some of the issues we're grappling with, and also the fact that the green agenda is part of that conversation for us. So thank you very much. And thank you, Judith and Joe, for stimulating that discussion. So we come now to the really to the close of our formal public meeting. I just want to thank everybody for all your contributions to this meeting. But before I let you go, I'm just going to reinforce how important it is for you to join the next meeting because we have a private meeting of the Council of Governors. We do need to make a few decisions and have a few conversations that particularly Carol will be leading. I can see that Carol has put her hand up. And just to say that I'm actually I'm not going to join the meeting immediately because the first item is to talk about my appraisal. So Melanie will be chairing the meeting, but I wonder if we can, the sooner we start, the sooner we can try and finish. So would it be okay if colleagues could join the private councillor meeting in 5 minutes, give yourself a comfort break. So at 12:10, if you could make sure you join the private council meeting link. As I say, Melanie will be there to chair the meeting and I will join when I'm invited to do so. So Carol, did you want to say anything else before I close the meeting? Hello, Carol?
Would it be possible to have a 10-minute break?
Okay, that's fine,
Sorry.
Carol. No, that's absolutely fine. Let's do that. So 12:15 then, please, if that's okay, which was the original time, I think, anyway. So 12:15, please join the private link. And I'd really urge all the governors, please, to do that because we do need to be quorate for that meeting. So thanks very much, everybody, and see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Bye.